Those of you for those of you who are new, I'm Tony Rosendahl, and I'm the president of the Milwaukee Area Wood Turners for this year. I have some announcements and things we want to start with tonight. Typically, we start with George. George is our membership chairman and our treasurer. So, George, I'll let you address both those issues.
We have money in that.
We do, yes.
But George is going on a cruise in Europe in 2 weeks, so you may not see him after this meeting.
So we have about $10,200, but we have a bill coming up for our insurance, which will be $400, which, you know, we have to pay. So other than that, we've got some members who have paid their dues, so it's going to go back up to probably about $10,000. And we have some guests tonight. Dave Wilcox. Dave. Mike Quinn. Mike. So,
Yeah. Take that with a grain of salt.
Scott Galaska. Yep. Scott. And Dave Pernushki. Members next month, and you, when you come next month to pay, Carl will be more than happy to take your money.
Right.
I'm going to be on that cruise.
Thanks, George. I have a number of things I want to talk about tonight. They're not in any particular order. So let's start. Carl, are you ready to talk a little bit about Turn for Troops? So
Yeah.
Carl Brewster is going to talk about Turn for Troops a little bit.
I'm not exactly sure what I want to say about Turn for Troops. We did great last year for a COVID year. I think it was around 1350 on 10, but about 700 were made by the guy up in Lackland, Andy Meyer. And he's like 2 miles out of my way for me to go and drop kits off and pick kits up when I'm going to my cabin. But he pretty much wouldn't take any from me for this winter. I wanted to give him 200 for the winter, but he sounds like he's going to throttle back. So that's going to hurt us drastically. And I need to talk to Chris yet. He was busy, but we pretty much get back the pen kits that we put out, but they hand out kits upstairs and they have no idea who they're giving them to or what happens to them. And they are missing 700 pen kits. And I don't know what even to say about that. But, you know, what we need to change it to is me and Dave give them to you, you give them back to us. You know, if we have to come to your house and pick them up, good, but you know, be proud of the pens kits that you make, because we get them down here in bags of 20 or 50 and there's no name on them. We don't have any idea who made them. And then we ask people and they say, oh yeah, I put them in the box downstairs. But you know, be proud of what you made. And I mean, we appreciate it, but you know, right now I've talked to Chris and C, but it can't continue this way because 700 pen kits is a lot of missing pen kits.
That's their big giveaways, not us.
We think, because I get everything out, comes back to me, so, or Dave, so we just need to fix their whole system, so. But that's what we know about them.
You want to point out the box is full of blanks. We have,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, is that the Home Depot box?
it could be both.
They're underneath the other table.
Yeah, these are.
Yeah, there's, you don't need to do anything with blanks. I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of blanks.
Hey, Carl,
If you get the pen kits.
for the new people, explain to them a little bit about the pen.
About the pen?
For the program.
Well, okay, so if you don't know about the program, it's called Turn for Troops, and what supplies the kits to us, turners who will turn these, and then we give the kits back. Kits end up in an individual little bag that doesn't say made in China on it, woodcraft. You know, I take them because they usually come in a wad of 50. I put them in an individual little Glad Ziploc, and I put a little thing on that says handmade by a Milwaukee area wood turner, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And those pens go out to active duty troops that Woodcraft National collects all these pens, and they decide this year we're giving 6,000 pens to the guys in the Abraham Lincoln, and this year we're giving them to the 82nd Airborne, and that's another 4,000 kits, and they get about 20,000 pens a year that we make and give to Woodcraft, and they distribute. And we are normally about number 4, number 5 in the country on making pens. When we're making 1,300, the top guys are making like 4,500 or 5,000 pens in their clubs. So, but so that's the Pens for Troop program, and I'm a retired vet, so it means a lot to me, and I'll keep turning pens. So anybody that wants to do it, we can explain and show you how to turn a pen, and it's a good thing. So I don't want to take up any more time.
Thanks, Carl.
All right.
Appreciate it. Here's the wood raffle wood right here. And I have a couple of pieces up in my car as well. Something I need to talk about. It's not a very exciting subject, but it needs to be talked about, and that's missing equipment. Right now, we're missing the live center for the tailstock on the Powermatic lathe. So if you know where that's at, please let one of us know. I was going to show somebody a little technique here a few weeks ago and could not find it. I've looked in the red cabinet. We've looked all through all these 3 cabinets. We do not know where it is. Typically, it sits either in the tailstock itself or it sits in this rack here on the back end, and it's gone. So like I told the board the other night, I'd be upset if it's stolen, but I'd be almost as upset if we find out that one of you guys borrowed it, took it home, forgot about it. We probably would lend it willingly and freely. But to just walk out of here with something like that is, please, if you ever want to borrow one of the tools that we have, talk to one of the board members, talk to me before you just walk out of here with it, because otherwise we don't have any clue where it's at. Thanks. As we start to near the end of the virus epidemic, pandemic, now they've got a new word for it. What is it when it just enters the general sickness? Pandemic. Endemic, that's it, endemic. Anyway, we're now, as we approach the stage of endemic, we're stopped at Walmart this afternoon to pick up a couple things, and the people in the pharmacy aren't wearing masks anymore. It's like, wow, we're almost back to normal. So how does that affect MAWT? Well, one of the things is that we'd like to start thinking about a professional demonstrator. In the past, we've had people like Cindy Drozda, Lyle Jameson, Nick Cook, Ben Foe, right? Yeah, all the people that signed the lathe here. So as we move forward, I think we'd like to do this again. If you have a suggestion for somebody to bring in, and there's a lot of people that we haven't had here, please let us know. Moving forward this summer, we have a couple of people lined up for remote demonstrations yet. Next month, we have a fellow by the name of Jason Clark. Some of you may be aware of Jason or his work. He's kind of out of the Chicago area. And what we're gonna, I'm sorry. What we're asking Jason to demonstrate is his Saturn bowl, where he turns a bowl with a really wide rim on it, and then he cuts the rim so that the rim will rotate around the bowl, but yet not fall off. And then that's for April, May. That's for April. For May, we have somebody scheduled from out the club, or at least a local person. And then for the next month, which is June, we've rescheduled John Jordan. So we hope to get John back for June. And then.
Is he coming here to do the
No.
Saturn Bowl? Okay.
Oh, no. I tried to ask him that, and he either didn't see the question in the email, or that's these are still remote demonstrations. The club members. Then in July, We have a local club member that's gonna just demonstrate bowl making, and entered an invitation to the Empty Bowls people. We haven't heard back from them yet, so. So I would be welcome to listen to any of your suggestions for a professional demonstrator. Any comments, questions? What have I forgotten, board members? Have I forgotten to talk about anything? Yes, we want to do the show and tell before the demonstration. I remember this time. So if you have a show and tell item, would you please go get it off the table, bring it up, and I think right in front of this table. You'll notice I'm not using a mic. We did a sound check, and so they should be able to hear us at home fairly well.
Brought a cupcake, little cupcake box.
Well, it's not ready.
No.
This is the first,
You got a first attempt at router on the lathe.
Thank you, Art.
First attempt.
Thanks, Steve.
There's 2 bowls that I've done. With my signature copper leg. The interior is patina. I demonstrated patina maybe a couple months ago. Carl did marbling. I showed the patina. The patina paint, which is a metal reactive paint. And the other one is a piece of oak that actually it has the gilder's paste wax on the bottom on this little video. Brass legs that I made, and the interior of it, there's some texture and carving on the top here. The interior has a resin core with a bunch of gears, so it has this very distinct steampunk look to it. Kind of a neat little thing. Thanks.
One I made is turkey call. Just a little bit of wood burning on the pan itself and slate call. And I did just like a utensil serving kit, 2 epoxy handles. Trying something different. Did like a buff finish on them. And then the final piece that I brought in was I made a full urn. Didn't do like a hollow turn on it. I just did like a hole down the middle to make it workable.
is that lined with anything?
No, it is not. Normally like the bag will go inside of it.
Give it a turkey call.
I hear a turkey.
Oh, no.
I like it. I like it.
That's a color.
This is some wood that I usually harvest all my own, but this I acquired. It was a crotch. I think it's hickory. I'm not sure. But it had the crack in it. Nobody had sealed the end, but I turned it. I really like the look of it.
For sure.
Had just 1 coat of velvet oil on it to give it that dark feel. And then at the I was able to win that large burl in the drawing, so I poured a piece out of it. I have this little one, and I have 2 more cores in here. This is the big part of the burl, and the thing is, I started coring from this end. I wanted to keep the natural edge. It came off the lathe. I looked at it, and when I examined the hold on it, there were deep cracks going straight into the burl. So the next bowl that I poured out of it had a lot of cracks, but it's, the cracks have come out and I can salvage the bowl. But I had to turn it around, so I think I lost 1 more bowl out of this. So totally I'll have 4 bowls. It's unfinished. The reason it is I still need to mount it. What I'm asking you folks is help me to finish this little bird on it. See that?
Oh, yeah.
So the bark inclusion is here. There was a big bark inclusion at the at the base, and it's pretty thick because it's not so thick right here. But anyway, if you have some ideas of what I should do to finish this, I'd be happy to talk to you about it, or I'd like to talk to you about it. Thank you very much.
I did not do anything different. Same old, whatever, but this is maple 24 segments. It's that Escher chevron kind of style thing. This is out of cherry. Nothing special, 24 segments for that one. This is what I want to talk about. This actually, I was just kind of like gathering, you know, I've got a lot of rings, you know, glued up, laying around, and just kind of glued two together randomly, put them in the press. Didn't really realize, went to take the top off, and I actually had two bottoms on either end. So just for the heck of it, you know, so this was gonna be the normal everyday, you know, base or whatever. So I decided to take this side off and just have it reversed. So this was kind of by accident, and I kind of like the shape that it turned out, and something different, but that's how that one was. It was two bottoms glued together. One other thing, in fact, Kurt, I didn't get to talk to you before the meeting started. On Instagram, maybe 4 days ago, did you have any issues on Instagram? I had a message that looked like came from Kurt. Didn't open it up, but just kind of responded a reply comment to it. And I ended up getting like 2,000 messages, and it was a link to a porn site, I think. Oh my God. So I kind of started with people that I kind of knew, followers, I kind of, you know, sent something to, and I was even afraid to do that. But so I changed my password. Did you do anything different? I mean, any?
I changed my password. Paid for my great niece.
Oh, did it? Oh, that's okay. Well,
I'm pretty sure she doesn't watch porn.
yeah. So I mean, weird. I mean, it was just a simple. And when I got the message from him, I had like put a video on, and it actually had a heart on it. And I thought, well, maybe Kurt's wife saw it and thought this was like extra cool, and just, you know, was just the only response reply. And I just said, you know, thanks, Kurt, whatever, you know, that stuff that you've got on cool and whatever. And then like an hour after that, when I looked back the next day after I heard about this, there was 2,000 messages, and I had some people send a message to me saying, you know, don't send that crap again or whatever. And I was like, I don't even know what they were talking about. Something to kind of beware of. Weird how that stuff
So
happens.
did you get the nice urine sex one too?
So I don't know what it was, but that's what I heard. That's all.
Sorry.
Yeah, weird, yeah.
Is that all the show and tell? So I was reminded of at least one thing that I should have talked about before, and that is volunteers. It would be really, really helpful if I had a person that I could count on to come into the meeting and do the wood raffle every month. You know, typically we might tap somebody from the board on the shoulder for that, but a lot of the board members are still a little bit reluctant to attend the in-person meetings yet. And they also have other things that kind of conflict with this meeting some months. So I could really use a volunteer to run the wood raffle. It doesn't take a lot. You just have to be honest, trustworthy, loyal, brave, and all those other Boy Scout qualities.
No way to go to Europe.
So, speaking of board members, we do have a couple that would be more than happy to cycle out if somebody wanted to volunteer to be on the board, or in a more formal sense, self-nominate to be on the board. And we would consider your self-nomination. So, that being said, Ron, are you about ready to go? Our presentation, our demonstration this month is by Ron Bukowy. And Ron is going to demonstrate therming. I got here later than I intended to tonight, so let me ask you a question that I should have already known. Are they gonna start with the PowerPoint then?
Yes.
Okay, so I am Ron's PowerPoint remote control. Okay, and I think, yeah, Ron is a fairly recent member of MAWT, but he's been in the word turning scene for many, many years, I think, about 10 years. Kind of used to be from the Chicago area and now lives right over by Economo. So,
Right.
welcome, Ron, and we're looking forward to seeing you.
As Tony said, my name is Ron Bukowy. I've been turning for about 10 years, but I don't consider myself an expert turner by any means. I put myself into the intermediate class. Can you hear me? I'm not sure how this microphone. Oh, then I'll speak up.
Are you turned on?
I'm turned on. Hello, can you hear me now? No? Okay, I'll, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Nothing's coming out?
Yeah, it's.
Okay, there you go. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Better? Okay. Great. As I said, my name's Ron Bukowy. I lived in Illinois the last 30-some years. But moved up here in May with my wife, and your granddaughter. So I used to belong to the Chicago Woodturners and also Windy City Woodturners for about 10 years. And now I'm a member of the Milwaukee area Woodturners. So topic tonight is going to be therming. And this is a subtopic of a more general topic that we all know called off-center turn. So if we could have the first slide. So basically off-center turning consists of two basic types. One is multi-axis turning or multiple axis turning. And the other one is something called therming. Multiple axis turning or multi-axis turning has been done many times by many different people. Probably the expert in the field is Barbara Dill. But Spheri with his bats, I don't know how many of you have seen Barbara Dill's work, but she does these incredible multi-center turnings. Even twisted boxes are multi-center turning. And basically what a multi-center turning is the center of turning is within the piece itself. Now that axis changes as you go up or down the piece, but the axis is always within the wood itself. And so that's been around for a long time. And therming has been around for a long time. Therming goes back to at least the 1700s, and most likely goes back before that. The name, nobody knows for sure what the origin of the name is, but most people who have looked at therming feel that it was named after Hermes, who was a Greek god, and they just put the T in front of it for turning. And Hermes was a peculiar god in the sense that he was unusual. And that's sort of what therming is. It's an unusual type of wood turning. In this case, it's also known as barrel turning. Are any of you familiar with that term? Okay. It's also known as angular turning. And I've come across another term called facet turning. Okay. And it's really this latter term that we'll be talking about mostly tonight. The problem is that there's a lot of different terms out there, and they mean different things to different people. I'm reminded of George Bernard Shaw, who said the British and Americans are common people, one people separated by a common language. And that's a problem here. We have different terms and we're not sure exactly what they mean. So this piece was probably the first one I ever thermed. And basically what it is that therming, I don't know if you can see that or not. If you look at this edge here, this is not round. Well, but the center of the turning for this is actually over here. So this would be turning around the lathe, and you'd be cutting or turning this part as this rotates around the lathe. This, on the other hand, so this is always convex, and this, on the other hand, as you can see, is concave. Well, this is what has sometimes been referred to as facet turning. There's a guy out of France by name of Gerard Bedoux, and he has done some facet turning, but he never really got into it. And outside of maybe Springett, I've seen something by Springett on facet turning. Now, whether or not they were doing facet turning back in the 1700s, I cannot find any evidence of that, but they probably were, okay? The history is difficult to dig up. At any rate, as you can see, this is concave on this surface, a convex on this surface. And that's, so to try to come up with a common language, I've classified this all under therming. And therming, next slide. Okay, so I call it positive and actually the better term is inside and outside therming. But this would be outside therming, and this would be inside therming. Okay, and there is a term, negative therming, which is not there. But we might talk about that later. At any rate, with the therming, you need a shape somewhat similar to this. So this is my third rendition of this shape. The first two, I did not use T-nuts, and I find that the T-nuts give me far more accuracy, whereas what I was using before gave me more flexibility, but it was less accurate. And that became a real difficult thing because I was always adjusting and readjusting. But as you can see here, if this was outside therming, I would be turning along this edge of the workpiece. With inside therming, or inside therming, I'm turning along this edge of the workpiece. So it's a little bit like turning the inside of a bowl, except this is more flexible. Next slide. Okay, so inside therming or facet turning, you can see here that this is the center of, this is the axis of turning. This is the piece being turned. And you can see here that this is where the turning is taking place. So this gives you the concave appearance to the bowl. Now what you have to do is you have to turn and then you rotate. So depending on how many degrees you rotate it, determines how many sides you come up with. So if you rotate it 5 times, it's your rotate, or 72 degrees, you're going to come up with a 5-sided bowl. If you rotate it 60 degrees, you're going to come up with a 6-sided bowl. And you can do as many sides as you want. I've even done some 2-sided bowls. but not with this jig, with a somewhat different jig. So, so the turning on the inside is always concave. Next slide. This is what I refer to as outside turning. This is traditional turning. This is what they have used on barrel turning. The point is that the axis of turning is there, and the piece that's being turned is there, and this is what's being turned away. So you have a curve, but it's not based on the center of the piece you're turning. So, all right, next slide. Or any questions so far?
How do you accurately rotate it the number of degrees you want to rotate it?
With the jig, I'll show you. Next slide. So this gives an example. Tony was able to come up with this diagram, and it shows how turning the outside will give you the convex surface. Turning the inside will give you the concave surface. Next. This.
Leave that one out.
Pardon?
We were gonna leave that one out.
We can talk about it briefly. This is one other type of therming that has been called negative therming. And in this case, you are turning this piece and then it's always segmented. So you have to put these together and you can get a flower shape or a daisy shape or whatever from that. Next slide. So this gives you some ideas to what we're talking about. So this is a jig. The piece of wood being turned is there, and you can you find that, or I found that it's about a third of the size of the jig. So my blade is a 16-inch, so I can turn a little over 5 inches. The center is about 5 inches, and this is all turned away or gone. And then the other side is about 5 inches. So I can put 4 bowls in there and have pieces in each waste blocks in between to act for, they serve several purposes. Now, what you can do now is, if you imagine this is the bottom of the bowl, this is the top of the bowl, this is the outside, or this, I'm sorry. So this is the bottom and top. Now you can either turn it straight, have it concave curve, or have a convex curve. Now this curve from this side to this side is always going to be concave. But now you can have a concave and convex in the same curve, and you can have these complex curves. Okay. So when you're turning normally turning a bowl, it's always convex. You know, whether you're looking at it from the side or you're looking at it from the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. It's always convex. This gives you a complex curve where part of the side is concave and part of it is convex. And we'll pass this one around. This is the most dramatic of ones. But that's a 4-sided one. And here's a 5-sided one. And a 6-sided one. So that gives you some ideas to the flexibility of what you're doing. What's the next slide?
It kind of tries to show that in 3D.
Ah, okay.
So I've taken away all of the support, what do you call them, guide blocks? The 2x4s, I've taken that away and just tried to show the workplace with cut lines.
Okay. So this is a jig I came up with, as I said. And this one I just set up for 2 turns. or two bowls to be turned, but you can put a third one there and a fourth one here, or you can just do one, just make the rest of it waste wood. For convenience sake, I use pine 2x4s for the waste blocks, but you can use any wood you want to. And if you have some waste wood around the shop, and you can just cut it to size, and ultimately you can turn it. What I'll do is I'll mount it. I'll put this jig down on the waste wood. I will then have a punch that goes through these holes and punch it. And then I will drill a hole in the waste wood for a T-nut. Okay. And with the T-nut, I can then, and this jig is already set up with T-nuts, and on each side of the T-nut or the bolt going through the T-nut are holes for wood screws. So it's the wood screws that really hold this together. It's not the bolt and T-nut. Okay. The T-nut in this case are there purely for reference. Okay. They for alignment, making sure that everything is in the right alignment. And with my first jig couple jigs I used, instead of this system, I had slots that 4 slots, and there was metal on each side. And what I would do is I would tighten the bolt down on the slots and then put in the wood screws. And that is what held it in place. The problem with that system is that the wood screws are perpendicular, or they're along the axis rather than on the rotation. So this way, they are able to, when they're situated this way, they're able to take more force from the turning, because initially you'll be turning a lot of air. When they're situated this way, they have more difficulty taking that force or absorbing the force. And I have had some screws actually bend on me, wood screws bend. So I find this to be much better. The other thing is that with the other setup, you can move it however far you want. And this gives you flexibility as to how many sides you want. But the disadvantage is that it's difficult to place it in the same spot every time. But this way, with the T-nuts acting as references, you get it in the same spot every time, and that makes life a whole lot easier. The disadvantage is that you're limited to certain sizes. If you look closely at this isn't quite, these are not quite in a circle. So these 4 are the same distance from the axis, and these 4 are the same distance from the axis. So what that means is that I can turn slightly larger ones or slightly smaller ones. And as you go up in number, say 6 or 8 or whatever, the bowls can actually be a little bit larger. As you go down in number, they have to become a little bit smaller, simply because of the way the reference is. But at any rate, so you put your waste wood, attach your waste wood with wood bolts or wood screws, and then you have a alignment for your turning blanks. Now, in this case, what I did is I basically made a pentagon out of hardboard and traced that onto the piece of wood that was going to be my blank. Then I found the center of that. I would drill a hole, put a T-nut into that hole, and then I would place it with the jig for finding the center. I also would have holes where to pre-drill the holes for the wood screws. And so place it on the board, on the jig, tighten everything up. Now at this point, it doesn't matter if you leave the bolts, the T-nut bolts in or not, because it's not really doing anything. It was there purely for reference. And as I said, the wood screws are what hold everything together. And you start to turn. And now, in this case, what I've done is I turned two sides, this side and that side. So what I would do is I would turn one side, rotate it from this end clockwise, and turn the next side, rotate it clockwise, turn the next side, rotate it clockwise, turn the next side, rotate it, and finally get to the last side. The problem here is that when you get to that last side, there's a great tendency for tear, okay? Because this gap has suddenly disappeared, and you have now a gap filling that in. So what I have found is a trick that I have found is to simply take, so in this one, it's the same thing, and this has been turned on two sides, but instead of rotating that last side clockwise, I rotated counterclockwise to pretend this is the last surface I'm turning. And what I found is that you can take plastic bag, anything, you know, junk bag, and just simply fill it with wood chips and CA glue and pack it down in there and work your way up. Attach it to the waste block, and now you have a surface here. As you turn it, you're going to prevent or at least greatly reduce tear out. Even if you get tear out, it's not the worst thing. This one was badly torn out. And as you can see, I simply sanded the sides so that it's hardly noticeable. And you don't have the real sharp sides like you have on the pieces that are going around. But it's still a nice looking five-sided bowl. Any questions so far? Yes.
Keeping it in balance. I'm sure you're gonna come up with that.
It's not hard. It's really just easy. I mean, I have a Nova DVR, and I get almost no vibration. Okay. The first time you turn it, these pieces of wood, as I said, are just waste blocks. So there's in all kinds of shape. But once you get that first surface, you now have a surface to follow, okay, which is a big advantage of this. So that when you rotate it, you now turn down to this surface. So your next surface in rotation is going to be the same as your last surface and the same as your next surface, etc. And so whether this surface is, in this case, this is convex, but whether it's convex, straight, or concave, you simply follow the surface. And now the only area or the only part you're turning away is the wood on the piece you're turning, because you now have your surface. This also has the advantage that you can sand it, okay? If you, any of you have turned air, a lot of air, you realize this is a very difficult because you're always hitting the air, and so you don't want your fingers in the way. Additionally, sanding it too much is going to take down on the crispness of the edges. So they're not going to be as sharp or as well demarcated as your sandpaper hits that first side. But in this case, it's not a problem at all. Okay. So it really does have advantages. Did I answer your question?
More or less, yes. I like to try to see it and live it.
Okay.
Better.
All right. One thing I did is one time I got a hold of it was a tree that came down, a big maple, and the branches were 20 inches, just the branches. So I mounted it on the jig. I then took my bandsaw, went around the outside edge. I then put a pattern on here for four 5-sided or 6-sided bowls. I forget which I think it was 6-sided. but it doesn't matter. And I cut out the pith, and it turned beautifully. It was green wood, it just turned like butter. And the rotation was no problem. And you don't have to worry about the pith. It's all end grain turning when you do that. Including hollowing out the bowl will be end grain turning if you do it that way. But I found that I had no problems with drying. Okay, those of you who turn green wood, you're told you got to turn it down to consistent thickness. Well, that's not true if you're doing end grain turning. You can be very inconsistent with your thickness, and it doesn't crack on you, as long as you have the pith out of the way. Now, this was maple, and maybe other woods would crack, but that was my experience. I had no problem turning green wood and uneven or irregular sides, no cracking whatsoever. I showed one of these pieces with was a straight-sided cut because I wanted to try my hand at veneering, and it just veneered beautifully. And so it was a nice experience doing straight-sided cuts. At any rate, is there another slide from?
Just some slides that show pictures of the jig mounted on.
Okay, yeah. So that gives you some ideas to what this is. So these are those two pieces of wood. This one is walnut. This one I think is factory. But want to see some turning?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Plug in. Think we're using this size, is that right? Yeah, it should be the point, pull on, so I think it's already out, so you just
Turn it on.
turn it down, pull it out, there we go, so you can turn. That's your bag.
Yeah, that's the bag, so don't worry about that.
Normally doesn't sound like that.
I got rid of that.
I think the bag just came apart, if you had
Yeah.
wood chips glued up there.
Oh, well. What I did is I used double-sided tape to hold this bag in there. In the past, what I've done is I usually screwed it in once I had it with the CA glue. But even so, you'll get the idea of what's going on here. Can take that bag out of there.
How fast are you turning?
I think I usually turn it around 500-600. I've gone up to 800 and it does fine, but yeah, I usually turn around 500 or 600. Even when I'm taking away the waste wood. Okay, and there's a lot of air then. 400 is fine. And I get no vibration off of my machine, and that's a smaller machine than this.
How about the pieces are in between the waste blocks?
Yeah.
Fixed in there, how else are they attached?
How else are they attached?
They're attached with the.
Basically two wood screws. There is a bolt
That's.
through the T nut, but that's not holding it. Okay, that's purely for reference. That's to set up, make sure I have the bolts in the right place. So there's two bolts that are holding each of these, and they're in the same line of rotation as the lathe. One thing I find to be very helpful, and unfortunately, don't have it here. When you're normally turning, you're looking at the other surface. So you're turning according to what you're seeing on the other side of the bolt. In this case, what I find to be very helpful is a bright light shining this way, because now with my tool, I'm looking at the shadow of the tool as it approaches the turned wood already. So it casts a shadow, and the closer I come, when the tool meets its shadow, I'm at the surface. But you need a bright light here. This will still work.
Mike, we're gonna get, see if we got a quote.
Oh, okay.
Ask you what tool you're using?
This is a Easy Wood depower, but this particular carbide tip on it is a negative rate. So it's a more gentle removal of wood. This is just a gouge. I'm not real big on sharpening tools, so I usually go with carbide tip tools. But one of my favorite tools is this one. This is called a Tracy Owen fine finishing tool. And this is sharpened by putting a burr on this edge. And there's three variations of this. This is a left-handed, left-sided Tracy Owens. There's a right-sided, which has a curve in the opposite direction. And this is going from, this is meant to go from right to left. The right is meant to go from left to right. And then there's one that has a curve all the way around. And these are incredibly nice tools. They really have become one of my favorite tools. Yeah, I think that is, does.
You can move it around. It's on a magnetic base.
Oh, okay.
So your two waste blocks, you never really intend to touch them, right?
That's right. And
Would
if you-
would there be any advantage of painting them black or white or something?
I thought about that,
contrast?
but I thought about that. The trouble is that by the time you're seeing the paint, it's already too late. You've already,
Okay, well,
you've already deformed your waste block. Okay, this one is very nice. This can take off very fine shavings, and depending on how I rotate the tool, if I'm here, I'm taking almost nothing. If I'm there, then I'm taking the most off. And so I can have significant variability. And it also comes to a point which allows me to get down there to that point. So I really have become very fond of this, and it saves me a lot of sanding. I don't know if you can see this in here, but now the walls of the pieces being turned are almost down to the waist block. In fact, this one is just about there. I still have to take out some of this in the bottom, and
What a rate your tool rest.
pardon?
The tool rest drop.
Oh, thank you.
Some shavings in there. Or what?
Nothing.
You're getting shavings over there?
One of your sims came out. Just
Oh.
keep on, keeping on.
Okay. So let me take this off the lathe.
So you're taking the whole jig off?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got this. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there's a shit. Back to the video.
Otherwise, if you hold the jig, I'll spin the spindle backwards. Got it?
So now you can see this side is in line with the waste of wood, and so is this side. This side I cut a little bit poorly. That's why I put a shim in there, and then that came out. And you can see here there is some tear out. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Because when you get around to the last side, you can see there's a gap here. Okay, and that is the cause for the tear. In this case, it's not too bad. Can still be salvaged quite easily, simply by turning it a little bit again. But now I would sand it on the lathe, but it doesn't require much sanding. The Tracy Owen tool leaves a fairly nice surface. And I would then take out the bolt out of the T-nut take out the 2 wood screws, and I can do this on the lathe, or at least on my lathe, I'm not sure I can do it on this one. Take out the 2 wood screws, rotate this, in this case 72 degrees to the next surface, put it back in, and I'm ready to go again. You saw a lot of bouncing. If I was doing 4 pieces at the same time, I'm turning less air, and therefore it would not be as much in the way of vibration of the turner. But in this case, it's just 2 pieces. So that is the basis of it. Do you want to see it rotated?
Yes.
You would like to see
How do
rotated?
you position it for rotating? How do you pre-mark it for rotating at 72 degrees?
Well, it's already been drilled. It's been pre-drilled off of a little, either jig, I use hardboard, or off of,
So Ron, we've got the picture up on the screen of your template.
okay. Yeah, that template was for the first jig, which I said the slots were axial to the center turn. That template won't work on this jig. The
But it
holes,
does give an idea.
the holes would have to be, the 10 holes would have to be in slightly different locations. All right, so it's easy enough. Like I said, with my Nova, I can do this from the side back of my Nova. I don't have to take it off of my blade. So now, oh, this is what the base of the shape looks like. And you notice I have a T-nut in here, again for reference purposes. But this will serve another purpose when I go to hollow out the center. I now rotate it clockwise. Realign with the T-nut. And then once I have that aligned, I'll simply put back in my wood screws. And like I said, I can do this without taking the and this doesn't really matter at this point. I can leave that out there or not, it doesn't matter. Because the wood screws are holding it in, and I'm ready to go again. If I had 4 pieces in here, I would rotate all 4 at the same time. Again, the last one to be turned, the last surface to be turned is the problem surface. And I'm sorry that didn't work out as well as I would have liked. But I can assure you that with the proper attachment of the bag to the waste blocks, it will work, and it'll give you a nice sharp edge. You've all seen these are pretty sharp edges. So questions at this point?
So the reason that works is because when you were first doing your setup, you pre-drilled those different
Pre-drill all
holes
the holes, yes.
for the
Right,
2 that are holding it in.
right. Now, an alternative way of doing this would be to make a jig like this. Oh, so this piece I made off of this jig, okay? And then cut this on the bandsaw. The problem here, well, the good thing about this is that as you rotate it, that last side is not a problem side. The bad thing about this is you have a lot more accuracy to follow because these have to be turned to the right angle to complement the jig. And this has to be turned correctly, this has to be sawed correctly. And I'm just not a good enough person with a bandsaw to do that. Anyway, I don't mind turning air. It will allow you to turn less air doing that. But it's interesting. So this is one thing you can do with it. Another thing that you can do is I'm working on a project right now where this is much taller. The waste blocks are much taller. And I'm putting staves in here. So I'm turning the staves with a concave surface. And I will take that and assemble it, cut the proper angles on the crosscut saw, and put it back together. And I should have a very interesting piece to show you guys someday. So that's one of the things you can do with this. Another thing is that you can turn these crescent shapes. Okay, if you want, I can show you how to do that. But I have pieces here that kind of demonstrate. So if we were to take this off, all this off, what I would do is I would put this piece on, and then I would butt these pieces up against there. Okay, and here you are doing, you have to turn it in stages. So to get a crescent shape, you have to turn it 4 times. You have to turn what you do is you turn the outside one first, then you flip it over, turn the other outside one, then you put it in this jig to turn the inside one. You turn the inside one, you flip it over, and you turn the other inside one, and you can come up with a crescent shape. Now there's been a little sanding in here to round off the edges, but you can make that crescent, the profile of the crescent shape, whatever you like. I personally like the idea of turning boards because they're easy to get. They're a lot cheaper than turning a, yes?
How do you hold those crescents in here?
Oh, same jig. I put bolts. I have bolts through the, now in this case, you don't have to, the bolts and the T-nuts will hold it, okay? I still put wood screws in for safety's sake, but the bolts and the T-nuts are enough to hold it. Now, once I have turned it to my satisfaction, okay, and this is an old one that I did. I now take this and keeping the T-nut in place. I have a jig that is a very simple jig where the bolt goes through a piece of wood. It's now placed into a 4-way chuck, and it's held there, and this is for centering. Once I have it centered, and I know it's centered, I then glue a waste block on this side. This has already been flattened, so I glue waste block on this side. I then bring my tailstock up, secure it, and turn the waste block to fit my 4-way, 4-jaw chuck. And then once that's all done, and you can either CA glue this or hot glue, hot melt glue. I then turn it around, put in my 4-way, and I turn out the center of the vase or whatever it is. It took me a while to figure out how to turn a box, but you can turn boxes. Okay, this is a kind of an egg-shaped box. So unusual. I'm not sure I like the proportions, but I can tell you, there's nothing like that out there anywhere. Nobody is doing this. Okay.
The one right to your left with the glue block on it.
Yeah.
show me how that would be in the jig.
Okay. Initially, remember the glue block is not on here initially. I would have a four jaw chuck there, and I would put already have a little piece of wood that accepts my bolt. I would probably,
I mean the outsides.
oh, what about the outside?
You would do, yeah.
Okay, now I put a piece of waste wood here, glue it in place. I bring my tailstock up, and I turn this to my four jaw chuck diameter.
I want to know how it was in the jig when you thermed it.
Oh, it was this way. So the bottom is always up. The top is down, obviously. So is that what you were asking?
How tall was your waist block? Did you take your waist block?
Well, the waist blocks are always going to be as tall as this is. So in this case, the waist block was, what is that, about 4.5 inches, something like that. So, yeah.
So the waist block or the block side was out,
The bottom was out. So to sit
the bottom this way.
Yeah. So this would be sitting like that, and the waist blocks would be around it. Okay. I haven't gone beyond 6 sides. I've done 4, 5, 6. I've done a number of 5s. I like 5. When it comes to turning greenwood, what I found is that the wood screws tend to loosen, okay, because the greenwood just can't hold it. But if you just simply put a drop of CA glue onto your wood screw and put it in, it'll hold it, and there's no problem getting that wood screw out of it. So, yes.
Do the pieces have to be snug in between the waist blocks?
Preferably, yes. Now, that one that you saw the piece of wood fly out, I had not cut that properly. So there was a gap there, and I wanted to fill that gap, so I thought that just putting a shim in there with some CA glue would have held it a little bit. Other questions?
So do you want to talk a little bit about what you use the crescents for? You had them here one time for show and tell.
What I usually,
The crescents that you make, I forget what you call them, but they're strung together with fishing line.
tessellation. I'm sorry, integrity. Yeah, I gotten interested in, I always go to unusual projects. I've gotten interested in something called tensegrity. And tensegrity is a term that was made up by Buckminster Fuller. And it basically means integrity through tension, okay? So with tensegrity, you can, the piece I showed before, this is not the same, had a whole series of holes drilled on this side and this side, and then I threaded it with monofilament, and I pulled the monofilament tight, and what it is that the two pieces will now remain in the same position. The inner monofilament is pulling the two pieces together. The outer monofilament is pulling them apart. So this part here is being tightened for that part, so it's trying to pull it this way, and these are pulling it that way. And that is something called tensegrity. You can take tensegrity to all kinds of possibilities. And these, I made a series of 8 of these, and they have to be about, I made them about the same size. So theoretically, you could have other sizes. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make a piece that will go around. So they're all connected with monofilament, and you eventually have an 8-sided open whatever. But you can do yes.
How do you hold those crescents there on the second or the third and fourth turn on the inside there?
Yeah. This third one is easy, you just cut it or turn it down, okay? It's a fourth one, okay, because as you turn down, you may break through, and if you break through, that piece is going to go flying. So what I do is I take some duct tape and simply tape the outer, now the outer edges have already been turned. Okay, I take a piece of duct tape, tape it. Now remember, there's a bolt on this side holding this piece of wood. Okay, and the duct tape is there to keep the crescent from flying off. Usually you don't cut all the way through, you cut part way through, you can see gaps, and then I take it off and I just go to the bandsaw and I finish cutting the rest of it that way. Other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you have your 5-sided piece.
Right.
You know, like the one that's standing up.
Yeah.
You have to turn that completely in that jig to the shape you have. You can't take your 5-sided piece like that dark red one there and put it over there and do anything with it because you're gonna turn off all your sharp edges. So all the sharp edges have to be turned inside the jig.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And we can talk about, we'll be talking about that as well. Other questions? You want to take a break or do you want to keep going?
How much do you have left?
Not a whole lot. I want to talk about spandrels
Okay,
and I want to, I can change this around to show how that is done.
okay,
That'll take a few minutes.
all right. So let's take a break and try to reconvene about 5 after 8, 10 after 8. It's now 7:50.
Oh, no, it's on. Can you hear me now? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone out there on Zoom have any questions? Okay. During the break, I took the rest of the jig apart to show you the center portion. This is really the guts of it. So you need a small metal base plate. This is 3.5 inches. And this has to be secure because this is what holds everything together. But I found that regular plywood does not hold up as well as I would like. My first 2 jigs, one was regular plywood, one was marine grade plywood, and one tore apart, the other one warped. It just did not hold up well. So this I found has held up the best. And as I said before, if you look at this,
What is the material?
this is compressed wood. Actually, it came from a desk that one of my son's desks that I took apart and said, hey, that's a nice piece of wood. I can use that. And it has done well by me. So if you look at this, there's actually these holes are offset from these 4 holes. And the reason that is that these allow me to turn things further out, lower number of curves. This allows me to turn something further in. So this is actually set up for 6-sided. This is set up for 5-sided. So the more facets, the more turns you have, the bigger it becomes, the bigger you can make it on the jig. Okay. Then I countersunk these so that when I put my pieces down to turn, all I have to do is drill a hole in the piece, in the center of the piece, and hammer in a T-nut, or place a T-nut in there, and now I'm centered on that. Okay, and I don't have to worry about anything. It's flat on the surface. And then I can just put, and I also drill holes in the back, not unlike this. And that'll, so when the peanut is in place, I simply put my wood screws through there and that holds everything in. This is also used for, I use this for other variations. So you can basically put any type of jig you want to put on here. So as I said, I've done boards, you know, and that's where I came up with the crescent shapes. And I'll show you that in a minute. I've done pieces out to there for stays, so I can make some concave stays. And that will be another project. So it's fairly versatile, okay? And then each time you change the shape of whatever you're turning, whether it's six-sided, five-sided, concave, convex, straight, you obviously need different waste blocks, okay? You could use the same waste blocks over and over if you're turning the same shape over and over. But generally speaking, you have to start from scratch. And then as you turn that first surface, that gives you the profile of your piece. Okay. You can do OGs. I haven't done an OG, but you can do OGs. You can put any shape in there that you want. I suspect that I could do a profile. So a face profile in here, and not unlike what they call ring turning, what they do in East Germany, the ring turners. You can put any kind of profile you want in here, and you come up with nice, sharp, demarcated edges. So for the crescent shapes, what I did is I placed this like that, and then I took a board. I attached the board via a bolt through that onto there, and I've used a little double-sided tape, and I was able to turn this in basically no time. Okay, so you start with the outer surfaces first. You turn one, then you turn the other. They have to be further in. So you turn the outer surfaces. It's actually like this. Well, that gives you the outer surfaces. As you can see, that's smaller than the diameter of the jig. To do the inner surface, this surface here, that's where the separator comes in. So this allows you to do the inner surfaces, and then you turn the outer surface, you flip it over, you turn the outer surface, so that gives you two sides. Then you put the separator in, you put it back in the jig, you turn the inner surface on both pieces, you flip it over, and you turn the inner surface again, and that gives you the crescent shape. Questions about that? Okay. Another topic I'd like to get into is something called spandrels. Spandrels is an old term, and the definition seems to be changing. They're now using it in all kinds of things like biology and chemistry and different genetics. But it originally referred to Gothic cathedrals. So if you think of a Gothic cathedral, as the columns come up, the stone columns come up, at the top they arch up and they form an arch. Well, evidently, people did not enjoy looking at the timbers of the roof with the arch, so they filled in the arch with plaster and lath. And then eventually they came about to paint it or decorate it. So a spandrel is basically a wasted space. It does not have any support, it does not give any support. And you can do with it anything you please. You know, Sistine Chapel, terrific spandrels. Okay, but you have lots and lots of options. And so, let's take the 5-sided piece, the 6-sided piece. So these would be the spandrels. Okay, this doesn't count. Okay, this has no support whatsoever. And you could actually cut these away and you would still have the integrity of the bowl. You would know it's a bowl, okay, it doesn't have big gaps in it, but lots of the bowls we turn have big gaps in them, you know, artistic turning. But you can put anything in here that you want, okay? So you can, like I said, if I made instead of convex in this case, I put some, blocking on the term, not marquetry, but veneer. I simply put some veneer in there. The nice thing about that is that I can get very, very nice looking veneer. You know, whereas if I went out and bought that same piece of wood and say lace wood or whatever, and a block that size, it cost me a fortune. I can put 6 pieces of veneer in there and it looks really nice. It does. And it's very easy to do. You know, just use contact cement. And there was an article in American Woodturner not too long ago about veneering on the curve, which you can do, but you're limited as to how steep of a curve, and it looks tricky to me. I don't think I would attempt that, but I never veneered before, but I easily got pieces of veneer to stay in place, and I could see what the pattern of the grain was because I could see the veneer. And then you can do whatever you want with the inside. You can build it or paint it or whatever. And, you know, so there's all kinds of possibilities. One consideration is that you could do a Hans Weiss block on this. Do you know, you all know who Hans is? Okay. Hans does these incredible, he's a German turner. He does these incredible turnings where very thin lines and they overlap inside and outside. So the old saying that the outside of the bowl cannot exceed the inside of the bowl, the inside of the bowl cannot exceed the outside of the bowl, doesn't apply here. Because you can go through this piece of wood, basically take a rotary tool, go through this piece of wood, have gaps, you know, and it's not going to fall apart. So your inside diameter exceeds your outside diameter in this particular case. Okay. You can decorate, you have, if you want to call them facets, that's fine. Or you have, in this case, 6 facets, okay? And you can decorate them differently, you can decorate them the same. You can do marquetry, you can do any type of piercing, any type of decoration you can think of, painting, whatever, okay? And each one of these has its own space, as opposed to, say, a turn bowl. Yeah, you can do the same thing on the turn bowl, but there's no separation. This gives you little vignettes, you know, little areas that you can apply your decorative arts to, okay? So I find this a very, very interesting thing to do. I don't plan to stay with it too long. My wife tells me that I have the attention span of a gnat. So I am, as I said, I'm not an expert turner. I'm not an advanced turner. You know, I like to look at, I like forms and patterns. So if I see something that is a pattern that I haven't seen before, I decide, you know, let's see how I can do that. Okay. Or if I see a form I haven't seen before, I've never seen concave sides before. Let's see how I can do that. And sometimes I stumble into these things. Sometimes I deliberately go after them. Like the tensegrity, tensegrity, I'm deliberately going after that. But this one I literally stumbled into. Okay, I was watching, someone I was watching a YouTube video by a guy by the name of Robbie the Woodturner out of England. And he hasn't posted in several years. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but his poster's still up. And so very interesting to see what he has done. And basically, he started turning, he did not call it therming because I don't think he was familiar with the term. Common language again. But he tried to make a 3-sided thermed bowl. Did not work out for him. He came up with a 6-sided thermed bowl to make everything balanced. And in the YouTube, you can see why he did that. Okay. So I thought, hey, that looks interesting. I can do that. And I got this turn. And then I looked at this and I said, well, I can make a concave surface on this instead of just a convex surface. So I did, and then I rotated this. And so this was the first thermed object I ever turned. And I'm probably going to go on to other things, but the technique itself is very applicable. Okay, those crescent shapes I showed you for the tensegrity, I'm doing spades, concaves, and I'll be putting those together, and that'll give me another option. So there's lots and lots of options with this. Questions?
Well, thanks, Ron. Is Dennis still out there? And Dennis, we're going to share a screen with one of our audience members. Get under the microphone. Oh, Dennis, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, I think I can do it. Yeah, the host has got screen sharing disabled.
Jerry, I think Jerry's trying to get it turned on here. This isn't something we've really done much of, although I guess I shared screen one night.
Yeah. You make my calls? I'm working on it.
Another volunteer we could use is we have purchased a hose reel for our air hose, for our air compressor, which we now have sitting under this bench here. Somebody wanted to come and install this under the bench. It'll make cleanup a lot quicker instead of having to fight the air hose. There's our screen. Yeah, so that's a string tension. Dennis, can you hear us? Talk to us. All right.
Well, in this case, with tensegrity, none of those pieces are touching each other.
Right.
They're all held together by the steel cables.
Right.
As you can see, they're all rods. I figure it's a split turner. Should have more of a curve, so that's what they've been working on.
But it's kind of the same principle as
Same principle,
right.
but the variations that you can do with tensegrity are basically infinite.
Well, thanks again, Ron. Thanks for everybody who has come tonight and all of you who came in on Zoom. We will have the wood raffle here in a minute. Just wanted to mention also that when we have the remote demonstrations, typically we will not have a wood raffle or a show and tell, because usually those guys want to take up the full 2 hours or whatever we have allocated for a meeting. So like next month, we don't plan on the show and tell or the wood raffle. Then the month after, do plan on it. And then the month after that, we should have John Jordan. So that's really about it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all of you dialed in on Zoom. And Carl, I'm gonna turn it over to you and start drawing those tickets. There's a lot of wood back there on the table.